So you mentioned biases. What exactly are biases, and what purpose do they
Yeah,
serve, and how do they come and hurt us?
right. So a bias refers to any case in which the way you process information doesn't match information out there in the world. And it's it's not just because it's noisy, it's because it's a noise or an error prone by, I mean, like, example would be like you're judging how fast you're going in the car. You're never going to know exactly how fast you're going, but you may be a little bit off, and that's just because there's limits in your system. But let's suppose every time you're judging your car, you overestimate it by 20 miles an hour. That would be a bias. And then we might say, oh, that's because when looking at the car, you're looking down at the road next to you, and it causes you to overestimate. But if you're looking out in the distance, you always underestimate. That would be a pair of biases that operate depending on different contexts. So in decision making, the sorts of biases we look at are often ones where people will use part of the information and they'll ignore others. The prototypic one is something called the availability bias. And this is a case where people overweight the information they can bring most readily to mind. One example might be something like travel insurance. This experiment is very, very elegant. Took real MBA students who are really taking a trip overseas and then asked them a series of questions. And one of the questions was, how much travel insurance would you pay for your return flight from this country, I think it was Thailand, to the United States? And they happened to be Columbia students and landing in New York. This was shortly after 9/11.
Oh, cool.
So you might imagine they say, I'll pay $40 because of that flight. Then they asked them the question, how much would you pay for your round trip flight from the US to Thailand back to New York? And they said $20. Of course, that included the flight that they will pay $40 for. But it's not as easily brought to mind once you think of the whole trip. Then they asked them the entire trip, including the flights and all their time on the ground. And they said $7. And you can't explain that in terms of any sort of logical weighing of costs or insurance needs and so forth. It's simply to say that when you're thinking only about your return flight, it's really easy to generate scenarios where you might need travel insurance. It's harder to think about that for the other parts of your trip. So that's the availability bias. Whatever most available to mind has the greatest weight on decisions.